Okay, guys, this is back. My apologies, I got disconnected and I was just going forth with the talk. I don't know how much of it was recorded, but pretty much what I'm saying is that this episode is called A Great Invention Called the World, and it's also famously, hopefully known as the Mystic and the Inventor episode, okay? In part 1, I explained parallels that ChatGPT had found between mysticism and an inventor, but I want to speak about it in a different context now. When we look at human intelligence, one thing that has been noticed is that it's a movement. It's moving. So one of the first things that you as a creature in a world require to become aware of is movement. And stillness. So movement and stillness, it's the second duality. I actually think the first duality, I mean, let's say there's consciousness on consciousness, then there is temperature, hot and cold. Then there is movement and stillness. By the way, guys, we can't ignore the role of temperature when it comes to the development of consciousness. Consciousness is possible because the conditions in the environment are possible enough for a creature to be conscious. So, when I was young, what I said before it, like part 1 disconnected, I think. When I was very young, I wanted to be a soccer player. But then I wanted to also be an inventor. I had made, using 3 Q-tips and a string, this robotic like looking hand that could close. And there was a small AC motor. And there was this feeling in me that there was a fascination for living as a biological entity, but there was also a fascination for the biological entity to use the unnatural opportunity. You see, consciousness is actually an unnatural opportunity. What has happened is not that we have, do you know what has happened? Something has deviated. Something either pushed our species into the awareness it has now, or our species discovered this awareness. For me, what fascinated me about the idea of inventing, and later on I realized the reason I wanted to become a soccer player, what I was fascinated by the soccer players I had seen was not just like, you know, wow, it's cool, they scored a goal and everybody likes that player. It was more of like, what was that in player's mind and IQ when it came to holding the ball. For example, right now we have Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi, right? And Messi won the World Cup, and everybody in the world thinks Messi is great. And of course, Messi is, it's well deserved. But I was thinking from the perspective of like Ronaldo, there was this scene. Pretty much Ronaldo's son was like very unhappy that Ronaldo was going to like this other team after the World Cup and whatever. So anyways, The value of each soul in the world is the style of their emergence in existence. When I say a great invention called the world, is because to consider creation we look at this world, and because it has design, they call this the cosmological argument. Because it has design, right? So I'll give you an example. Imagine somebody, like 1,000 years passes from now, and somebody gives somebody a phone, like an ancient phone or something. And that person in the future is like, yo, this ancient phone came out of nature. You know, imagine the future generations become so lost in their knowledge that they think that phones, imagine like cell phones and stuff are found in the dirt, and the future generations have lost their such scientific clarity that they think that phones and stuff came from the earth. The planet is like creating phones. Somebody would be like, no, that's nonsense, you know? So what I'm saying is, when you look at an object with design, for example, right now I'm sitting in a car, or imagine somebody is walking and they see a Bugatti or a Ferrari, okay? They see a Ferrari. And then imagine somebody's like, yo, this Ferrari spontaneously appeared. Now the answer is true if it's to them. It is true that the Ferrari spontaneously appeared to them. But in reality, the cosmological argument is saying that Ferrari was made by something, right? It was designed by something. So it has a designer. So when human beings are looking at the world, they're looking at it like, yo, what if it's an invention and it has an inventor? What if it's a design and it has a designer? What if it's a creation and it has a creator? Or if you're modern, it would be, what if it's a program that has a programmer? You see, religion gives one of the most profound metaphysical clues known to man. And it says it, I don't know in where in the monotheistic tradition, but in different religious books, but what it is it's this saying that God commanded man into existence. God said exist, and man existed. What does that mean? That means a command is a non-physical intent. Okay, these words of mine, they may be about physical phenomena, but they're actually non-physical. Doesn't mean they're not apparent, you know? Like, I can hear sounds, but I can't like punch a sound wave, you know? Who knows, maybe one day. Not joking. Can you imagine boxers in the future? They've gone into a concert, they're wearing special gloves, and they're just punching the sound wave so they don't bother the neighbors or the... So, if the world was an invention, sure, it could imply it has an inventor, but let us first look at the invention. And what clues do we get from the invention? So we don't know where so imagine we've gone into some inventor's laboratory or some inventor's studio, okay? And the inventor is not there. And so we are looking at an invention, and the inventor is not in the room, and we're trying to get a sense of who the inventor is, let's say. from the invention. We're looking at the invention to get clues of the inventor, of its nature. So first, we have to realize, about the notion of inventing. First question comes: why does the invention exist? Typical answer: because there was a need for it. So it's as if, like, when we look, if we treat this world as an invention, and we're like, yo, why did somebody invent a phone? Why did somebody invent the airplane engine? Because there was a need for something to be done with it. So it is fair to say, whether it's a human being creating something, or whether in some sense it's God creating the world, the act of inventing anything of shape is for the specificity of its shape to be used. So the greatest clue that mankind is not alone in this world is our shape. Because our shape is specific. That is the great clue. The outline of the invention is visible. Not completely, but partially. So many different beings, in so many different vessels, so many different shapes, forms, and it's even three-dimensional in space. We cannot ignore that there's geometry everywhere. We cannot ignore that what the meaning of life is an unknown awareness to a known geometry, to a known visibility. I found it very fascinating that we have, for example, very notable scientists believing in the unobservable universe, but they are not considering an unobservable self. Isn't that bizarre? They saw an invisible world, call it a black hole, call it dark energy, dark matter, but when it comes to, or even higher dimensions, right? Like, to me, it was very mind-blowing, very mind-blowing that religion is a sort of multidimensionalism, believe it or not, of a singular existential event. So what's going on is that the human mind is taking a singular existential event. Oh no, my lap. Oh, why? Oh my god. Sorry guys, I thought my phone was charging, but it wasn't. So I guess for all those people who dislike the music, it's no more music until the phone charges. But what I'm pretty much saying is, like, yo, dear species, dear creatures in the middle of nowhere, look around you and see that shape is a great clue. So if existence is an invention, the next question could be, like, we don't know, like, let's say we say, okay, who invented existence? The answer is, I don't know. And we're like, okay, we're okay with that. And then we go to the second, to the second view. Not just the question, who invented existence? Pretty much, it's this bizarre situation where we're like ants on a giant hill. And we've started to notice the hill. And really what consciousness is actually the emergence out of another type of consciousness. So what does this mean? When we wonder about the value of existence, its value is in attention. Friedrich Nietzsche said, if a tree falls in a forest and there's nobody there, did the tree fall? So we know that we require attention to access reality, but we also require attention to organize accessed reality. You see, imagine an artist that's drawing an artwork, but the artist is unconscious. The artist has no idea what it's doing, okay? Somehow imagine it's being moved by somebody else's hand, right? So imagine there's an artist, it has a blindfold on, its hands are being moved by somebody else, its body's being moved by a bunch of other artists, and in some sense this artist has been painting something that the other artists have been making it paint. The environment has been making the creature behave in a certain way, until this artist has suddenly awakened to itself. And let me tell you what this means. What's really going on in this world is an accumulation of intelligent points in one point. So what this means is that instead of thinking that there's one soul reincarnating, we should treat it as if, imagine there's infinite souls, imagine. And these infinite souls all want to occupy one point in the space-time continuum. And the reason is because all these infinite souls have been roaming around without a body, without anything, that at some point they're like, yo, let's work together to build a body. So what this means is, like, I remember when I was a kid, I remember seeing, like, I don't know, it was Alvin and the Chipmunks or something, these 3 chipmunks that would dress like a person and to get into like a movie theater or something. In reality, I think that's what's going on. First of all, this idea of physicalism, non-physicalism, this is just relative to our position. What is invisible to us could be visibly something, and what is visible to us could be hollow in another dimension. We don't know. So what I'm trying to say is that something has been happening in accordance to its own intelligence, and we have suddenly awakened. And I'm sharing this idea that this is a metaphysical context, okay, mystical idea, and this is something that's kind of I've arrived to in this talk, believe it or not. So what is the line of, what is my view? Imagine there is like, let's say, trillions or infinite spheres of energy in the world. Just spheres of energy. Small spheres of energy. That means imagine a soul is like a sphere, is like a glowing energetic sphere. Now imagine all these spheres were like, yo, we're bored of just being energy in the void. What if we cooperate? So what I'm saying is, what if infinite, invisible, eternal beings somehow, with a power beyond our comprehension, even though that's let's say with an unknown variable of a power, pretty much I'm suggesting, like, there were only souls in the void, and these souls were bored. They didn't know what else to do. Okay? So in competition, they could not achieve something. So they decided to put the competition aside, Just for the sake of speech, I'm saying this, guys. Treat what I'm saying playfully. And they decided to create a world and then create positions in the world where they could exist. You see, this is the bizarre thing about the monotheistic tradition, where it says God imbued man with its own breath and so, like its own essence. So it's kind of like the invention of man is God's way of witnessing its own individualism. You know, just like we see like celestial objects orbit. There's a lot of stuff orbits around non-physical stuff. Your whole life is orbiting around the non-physical idea of you. Every person you see is a biochemical mechanism, which means an object is active, and then this object, biochemical mechanism, has somehow managed to become aware of itself. You see that this is what I keep saying, that there was another evolution. I call it the subjective evolution in earlier talks a few years ago. That's what I call it. So, it is very obvious that the world is a psychological invention. I think everybody would agree to that to some degree. That our choices create our experiences. Or our experiences suggest what choices we have, you know. And I want, you know, those people who are fans, you know, of this channel, those people who walk with Mr. Within, and Mr. Within is just a pilot of a species towards the greatness of its inconceivable nature. If the world was an invention, we must appreciate this invention. As a 90s kid, I remember, you know, when my father would buy a TV or anything, I would be the first one to go open the box and just try to set it up. To me, there's something fascinating about how something is working and we don't know how it's working. And when I wake up in the morning, you know, I mean, sure, I go about my day, but a part of me is like, yo, the species still doesn't know what it is. What are you doing about that? You know, and a part of me feels like, okay, what can I do? And you know what I realized? I've realized something incredible. Civilization and modern society, modern global society, has reached such a hilarious point of distrust that nobody actually can be given an answer anymore. If people want an answer for truth, they can't. The type of human beings we have now are not capable of accepting truth. So the approach doesn't have to be giving people answers, but the approach has to be finding the important questions. You know, we can call this finding the golden questions of humanity. I might give a talk on this in the future. The golden questions of humanity means that instead of focusing on answers, we try to unify in the great questions we have. For example, you know, all the religious people in the world who are doing preaching on the streets and all of that, just imagine all the religious institutions, right, suddenly said, all right, enough preaching, okay, stop preaching, all the priests and preachers of the world. We're going to respect the religion from a different angle, right? And imagine all the religious leaders were like, we're going to have theologians work with philosophers and then work with the leaders of the scientific and secular community. And what the idea is that if something is true, it doesn't need to be sold like snake oil. Do you understand? If religion is incredibly true, then at the core of its essence and geometry, okay, at the core of its geometry, it will hold its ground and stay true. Do you understand? So all religious people on the planet have to understand, this is Mr. Within's opinion, of course I'm 1 in 8 billion, and I'm saying all of this respectfully because we all deserve to be in a world that we're here for the first time, right? The idea is we gotta respect each other enough to build an advanced world where we can respect each other more easily, okay? So respect enough until we can respect more efficiently. So anyways, what I'm trying to say is that for me, I had this idea where I'm like, instead of saying on a level, I mean, see, there's a spectrum. When it comes to human comprehension of a system, you got to look at the system's value from the simplest position and then the most complex position. And the incredible thing is some systems you can't see their simplest position and their most complex position, but some systems you can. For example, we cannot see the simplest state of the biological system because we don't know its origin. We have theories of its origin, but we don't know its origin. You know, even though it appears like we have a civilization, we're inside civilization 1.0, but civilization 1.0 is hollow. It's like the Truman Show or something. It's like fake, like cardboard civilization. That's what civilization 1.0 is. Because in some sense, people, you know what it is? It's like there's 8 billion of us in an unknown world, and the issue is people have stopped being explorers of their life. They have stopped being explorers of their world. Did you know that you have around like 100 years to figure out and try to get an answer or try to do some sort of research about what is this place we're all in before we exit? And do you know what that means? That means you need to have the fearlessness to go and reinvent the wheel. Do you understand? Mistakes were made. Civilization 1.0 is inefficient and is in some sense directed towards vacuuming itself towards a mechanical immortality. What does this mean? The way civilization 1.0 is going forth currently, it does, I don't care whoever you are, you wake up, have a nice cup of tea and think it's a great, lovely Sunday or a lovely morning, you're going to see that no. Civilization 1.0 is headed to a point where I would give it a sense that in 200 years from now, we're going to be robots acting like humans, or we're going to be we're going to prefer living in technology than in biology. Why? Because biology has become slow, because we entertained ourselves out of our biological existence. That's the tragedy of civilization 1.0 that we must fight, right? And it's not something like we gotta fight like, yo, grab a shovel and grab like a stick, or grab like, you know, tissue box and run in the streets to fight. You know what I mean? Those are like millennial rebellion, you know, fighting with like tissue boxes, you know, like the unopened tissue box, like, you know, perfect millennial weapon, you know. So anyways, even though somebody's like, yo, Mr. Within, relax. The issue is I'm not worried about myself, because myself is something that is, I got to deal with for like 100 years, right? For my lifetime. But what is way more interesting to me is seeing the efforts of all human beings. Do you understand what the advanced civilization means? The advanced civilization means the species is tired of wasting its efforts. Do you understand? It's like they're the biggest inefficiency of the human species. It is its absence of the greatness of vision. Do you know, they say in some sense, yo, people waste enough food to feed the world a couple times, the whole world a couple times. And I'm like, oh my God. Do you know, oh my God. It's like mismanagement. In the future, I don't know if, like, I hope it happens during my lifetime, maybe like in the next 10 to 20 years, but I hope to see an agency that has a global effort. You see, we are right now experiencing a self-hate society. And who we kidding? We got to be honest. They say in psychology, you know, first thing about the problem is acceptance. You got to accept that you got a problem. Our human species has to accept that this, whatever we're in now, is not enough. That's it. If this is enough for you, we're doomed. Do you know? But if this is not enough, if this is just the beginning, if the species is just stretching and waking up, if the lion is getting ready to roar in the void, what do you think? Why do you think I keep saying advanced civilization? Advanced civilization, because what greater game is there to play in the middle of nowhere? And imagine right now you're someone, right now society is hilariously haunted by the dualistic notions of winning and losing. It's not that those are not important, but those are contextually, like, most people are locked into that, right? Imagine you're someone, imagine you're a being, and in every lifetime you have been victorious. Every lifetime. And you have been victorious not because of your soul's unique ability. You have been victorious because you have been commanded to be the victorious part of the moments of others, for example. Imagine you were you know, there was a soul, and this soul was commanded, like in some sense the inventor of the world commanded the spirit of victory and the spirit of advancement to be the guardian angels of a soul, to be the escorts, to be the guides of a soul. What I'm trying to say is, if you're a being that has never been defeated, you don't know what losing is, you don't know what defeat is, then you don't know what the world is. Why? Because the world is filled with victorious and defeated beings, simply stated. You know, when I was younger, just maybe like for a month, couple months or so, there was a time where I was super interested in leadership and what it meant to be like a good leader. Then I came across this quote from Lao Tzu when he said, once the leader's task is done, the people will say we did it ourselves. And that quote revolutionized my perception on reality, that it's pretty much the idea of a catalyst. That means, imagine you're like a Shaolin monk trainer. Excuse me. Imagine you're a Shaolin monk trainer and you have raised a generation of Shaolin monks. And the last teaching is, in some sense, that the student has no teacher. You see, this is the folly of a teacher. If the teacher, when a student, this is something, oh my God, so many human beings don't understand. So this is the idea. Imagine there's a person who has knowledge, they're a teacher, and then there's a student. If there's two people, okay, and if one chooses to be the student of the other, the student is having faith in that person's reality. That means the student is stepping into the truth of the teacher's world. Now, the teacher, if the teacher is smart and wise, after the teacher has given the insight to the student through his world, he will give the power, that the trust that the student gave to him, back to the student, or the student will become attached to the teacher. You see, think about it this way. What kind of warriors do you want to create in the world? Warriors that are good when they're like a teacher is there in front of them, or warriors that can walk the world alone and become their own teacher? You see, that's what they do. They forgot to mention, after all those people who have worshipped the enlightened guru, if the enlightened guru doesn't make you realize the inner guru, you will be following another being around for no reason. And sometimes you might have an karmic purpose, like to go and see someone, but at the same time, do you understand? Like, we've reached a point where spiritual escapism is a bit like unnecessary at this point. Like, we see its hollowness. You know, this idea of creation even could be a flaw, could be an error. I believe they call this coherentism. What this means is that because we're like a candle in a dark room, the candle is processing the value and the meaning of the room in accordance to its own flame, to where it's starting from. Just like Galileo went to the Christian Inquisition, went to the church and said, yo, I saw the moons of Jupiter were spinning around the sun, and they were like, yo, don't talk smack, go into your house, And mankind thought that Earth was the center of the world. Then we realized we're not the center. And now we have to realize human knowledge has been the first attempt at human knowledge, prototype of civilization 1.0, has been created incompletely. We are living in an incomplete system, and we are expecting completion from it, not realizing we're the ones who have to complete it. You know what's going to happen in the future is something that I think all the politicians in the world didn't expect. People are going to start behaving so incredibly and so wisely, and give it in the next 10 years, I think, that world leaders are going to be like, wait a minute, We were here to govern people, but people are they are handling their lives, they're being responsible for their lives in such a way where it's like they don't need. It seems, do you understand what I'm saying? The idea is skill. This is the secret. I was like, what can be a common denominator between good, evil, and whatever kind of entity in the future? And I was like, it's competence. That means imagine an extraterrestrial lands in the future. This extraterrestrial doesn't have a mouth. Okay? And all the human beings are watching these extraterrestrials that have arrived on Earth and they don't have mouths. And all our psychologists, philosophers, and everybody, even the leaders, are like, yo, how do we communicate with these guys? And then somebody, an Olympic athlete comes in, it's like, yo, let's do the Olympic Games with them. Do you know? And so imagine for the first time we start communicating to this species that is not a species that can communicate, but in the sense of skill. And for example, somebody throws a javelin and the alien throws the javelin and it goes beyond the clouds, imagine. You know what it is? Everybody is a stranger to everybody else. But it is in our ability to walk with each other in the same moments that we get to see who we are to each other. Whoever you are listening, I want you to ask yourself, who are you to your species? That means imagine whether you right now, whoever you are listening to me, whether you have been welcomed or rejected by the world. Once you realize how incredibly it is designed, it is very hard to hate a masterpiece. Anybody who hates life, it's very hard to hate a masterpiece. It's too brilliantly designed. What that means is that it's such a excellent. It's like we're in such an incredible film that it's like no doubt there is a director, but how did the director? It's like, where's the film crew? You know, imagine we're 8 billion actors and the planet is the film set, and we don't see the production crew. We don't see the producer. We don't see the PAs, you know, we don't see the whole teams that are like keeping this film set going in the middle of nowhere. So the best thing we can say is consciousness directs existence experientially It's literally like existence. Imagine a dimension called existence and a dimension called experience taking turns. It's like not only is your body living in your mind living in your body, but your body is also living in your mind.